Hi, I'm Maud Mosley. My pronouns are they, them, and this is the other team's Too Queer for a Career, a monthly series that dives into different aspects of the music industry with individuals who are passionately working in their respective areas. My guest today is someone from a nonprofit community art space that prioritizes the safety and expression of women, queer, non-binary, and artists of color. Their physical space, publication, podcast, and other ventures function on principles of radical empathy, equity, and mutual aid. Thank you so much for being here with us this month. Would you like to introduce yourself, say a bit about what you do, and kick us right off with why you are too queer for a career?
Yes, I'm sorry, you just did such a good intro and my roommate just came home. I say, hi. She's pretending like she wasn't fed. She really was. In a timely manner, too. We have a cat.
I understand.
Okay. Hi, my name is Eden Hain. My pronouns are they, them. I am from Junior High, which is a nonprofit in Los Angeles. I'm too queer for a career because I'm a Sagittarius who thinks that a conflict is a really good way to get to the meat of a friendship.
Very, very fair. And I think a lot of people can relate with that. And honestly, we can talk about conflict a lot throughout this. I know it's a natural part of any work, any organization. And as I think we've discussed before, is not necessarily a bad thing or a toxic thing or a problem. But first and foremost, let's go back a little bit, because as you mentioned, you are here from Junior High, which is based in Los Angeles. Can you tell us a little bit about its history? How did it start off? And how did you come into the work?
Yes, I can answer all of those questions. So Junior High, which is actually technically in Glendale now, used to be on Hollywood Boulevard, just a hop, skip, and a jump away from the Hollywood Walk of Fame. We moved out of our Hollywood location into Glendale when, I don't know if you heard about this COVID pandemic thing that shut all group event, anything that involved being around people. It shut all of that down. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that.
I may have heard of it, just a little bit, back of the brain,
just a little putting the whole world at a halt. But yeah, we moved to Glendale after a good year and a half of just doing Junior High online, focusing on community safety, trying to find the accurate COVID information that was coming out from the CDC, making sure that people were able to have joy in a time that really felt sucked of joy, and also be able to learn and grow when the only place that you could grow in was whatever bedroom you were sleeping in. So that is sort of where we come to today in Glendale. We started being just sort of an event space based in political activism and wanting to encourage people to be active, center women, queer folks, expression that is hidden by the mainstream. And now we're just continuing to do that even more, a lot more learning, a lot more growing, going from a completely volunteer run space to a place that leads to people's careers. I do Junior High pretty much full time, pretty much the thing that pays my rent. And that's the same with a lot of our staffers too. We have people who help facilitate every event that we plan, and we're able to make sure that our community is fed and housed because of activism and joy and music and art.
Absolutely. And you mentioned that you kind of developed more into this full-time role, but how did you originally start with Junior High, and how did it turn into this role that provided a lot of growth and kind of that eventual stability for you?
Yeah, so it's an interesting origin story, and I think it's quite unorthodox because I was there at the beginning. I went to the very first fundraiser, but I was not friends with Faye, who is the founder. I didn't know anyone who was associated with junior high when I went to that fundraiser. What happened is a very funny story is my best friend Rhiannon ran into Faye at like a Staples while they were both trying to like make copies of their various projects. And Faye's project was creating flyers for the very first fundraiser for junior high.
This is such a queer way to meet.
No, right? And Rhiannon was like scanning copies of her poetry zine at the time. So they were just like, oh, women art? Yeah, we can do that. And Rhiannon was like, we've got to go to this fundraiser. We got to be part of this space. And I was like, we got to take it over, man. Like, this is going to be our spot. And eventually I kept going back to junior high and planning events, attending events, making friends with the volunteers, getting tattoos of various different like fundraisers that they did to be able to, you know, pay rent or whatever it was that was necessary back in the day. And I got to this point where I was like, I feel like one person cannot adequately run an entire venue space. And let me tell you, I was right. Because one person can't do it all, even if they're a Virgo like Faye. And I was like, can I help at all? So I really inserted myself through a very funny situation where she needed a cat sitter. So she was like, you can stay in my apartment. And I was like, great, thanks for the keys to your apartment and like the love of your cats. Can I also have keys to junior high and help answer your emails? And she said yes. So at first it was kind of just like a right place, right time for me. I don't know if a situation like this could ever happen again, where I was living at home with my parents, so I didn't have to sustain myself through money. So I could volunteer my time. And as my role got bigger, I learned that I could be more independent and I could move out of my parents' place and I could pick up the work that was required of me to be able to sustain junior high and also sustain myself. It was very lucky. I was able to move out right as I was able to get a salaried position at junior high because of my age and junior high's growth, which is just it's wonderful. I feel very lucky every day about it.
Sorry about that. I will cut out the pause. It's just she will not stop barking. That's why I had to.
She's so cute.
I had to mute myself because she will not stop barking. If she decides to start barking at you, she will not stop barking at you until you pick her up. So I just.
What's her name?
This is Mushu. She's 14.
Can Mushu be the special guest of this podcast? Like,
yes.
I'm here to interview Mushu.
Hello.
Whoever's editing this, I just need it to be known that it's important that Mushu is in the episode.
Mushu, you hear that? You're gonna be happy. She's like a stuffed animal. I'm just like waving her hands around right now.
Oh my God, so cute.
Okay, you're gonna be good now. Okay. Back to the podcast.
Yes. Yes, basically, let me see if I can just try to.
Yeah, no worries at all. And I mean, I love to hear where you're coming from. I think it brings up so many important points about just like how so many of us just get into this kind of work because we hear about something that genuinely excites us. And I think that's always such an unfortunate thing where, you know, obviously we live in this capitalist world. And so many of us come into all different sorts of working environments just under the fact that we have to. It's like, well, I have to work some kind of job because I have to pay this bill. I have to pay this rent. I have to afford to live, you know? I have to be able to make that X amount of money a month. And because of that, there's so much work that we just do, that we enter into, and we're just like, yeah, I can do it. I'm capable of it. But then it really does take away that opportunity for us to hear about opportunities and for us to really like come into something and really have that experience of like, I want to be doing this. This is fulfilling to me. I love this. Like, this is something that I want to be a part of, whose like its growth is meaningful to me. And I'm so glad that you've found that. Even though obviously
It's
coming into any
very
working
lucky.
environment, and even
Yes.
coming into any work environment like that, obviously there's still going to be things. Work is still work.
Yes. No, I mean, everyone is always like, "Are you sure you like this job?" And I'm like, "I promise you, like, no matter how stressed I get, nothing is ever going to make me feel quite as, like, good and as fulfilled as when I don't need the affirmation to continue doing the work, but when I do get the affirmation that the stuff that we're doing at junior high is good, is benefiting the community, people are having a good time. I mean, it makes me feel good that some of my best friends I met through junior high, literally my roommate I met through junior high, and not like I lived and went to middle school and junior high. These are not people that I went to school with. These are people whom I met through junior high, the nonprofit organization, and I don't even know what my life would be like without them. I've learned and grown so much, even about like my own family, and being able to like gain a larger sense of empathy through talking to people who I didn't necessarily agree with at first, who had different experiences from me. And I feel very, very fortunate that people have given me the time and energy, and felt that I was felt that I was holding a safe space for them and with them. And it's really beautiful. I feel very lucky. My parents very much so instilled within me a work ethic and the concept that experimentation is important, and that I should try and do anything that I wanted to while it wasn't necessary for me to make a living and to pay my rent. And so they were like, this is the time to be a musician. This is the time to put all your energy into a nonprofit. This is the time to do whatever you want, because at some point you're not going to be able to like experiment like this. There will be, medical bills to pay, and there will be, rent damages, et cetera, that you're going to have to deal with. But for now, while you're, 18, 19, 20, you should be able to do what you want to and feel fulfilled in it until you might hit a point when it's not realistic anymore, but it's realistic right now.
Yeah. And I love that that is a realistic thing for you, because obviously, that is an immense privilege that unfortunately not everyone has. But I think what's really powerful too about the work going on at junior high is that you're kind of starting, or at least trying to make sure that that privilege in some ways is being extended to others, that, you are creating
Yes.
arts and opportunities for learning and development and performance that, anyone can kind of step into or be helped to step into those things. And I think that's a really powerful way that every single one of us, can think about our privilege and think, well, I was able to do this, but what barriers were there for me? And how do I then either, sacrifice my own privilege, which we definitely need to do when possible, but also use that privilege to other people's benefit? Like, how do we extend that to them as well?
Yeah, I think that being a space built by built by Faye, who is a white cis woman, but also I help organize a lot of the happenings at junior high as well. And I am a white person. I think that having ally spaces that are focused on sharing the stage and being like, well, we were able to use our privilege to get here, so now we're passing the mic on to whoever feels like no one is affording them that opportunity. We've had so many people have their first solo shows at junior high who go on to like exhibit in freaking London. So like I think that it is important to use your privilege for good. I also think it's important to be like, okay, this is not the only thing that we need. We don't need 100 ally spaces. We also need to be like, okay, thanks for giving us the opportunity, but also we need more spaces that are made by Indigenous people and who are run by an entirely Indigenous team, run by Black people, and run by an entirely Black team. Like constantly, I get, why are you not franchising junior high, and you can't franchise community. And I don't think that there should be another junior high. I think there just needs to be more all ages art spaces so that junior high doesn't have to be the only thing. I encourage anyone who disagrees with us or who thinks that they can do it better to do it better.
Absolutely. And that's amazing. I love this. Just love that idea of you can't franchise community because that's so true. These spaces exist where they exist for a reason. And it's really important that people can be inspired by your work and want that where they are, but they can also take it amongst themselves to create that, to make that happen, and to make it happen in a way that makes the most sense for where they are and the people around them and what's available to them. But yeah, in terms of the work that you're doing, as you mentioned with, having initial founders and initial people working there being a very, at least originally like a white founded and white led organization, being founded on the principles of, radical empathy, equity, and mutual aid. How do you feel like that, practice comes into your work, or what do you feel like has come up in the past that, brings that into question and understands how you're passing the mic, but also how you're maybe remaining in control? And I'm sure these are all things that have been, discussed. And I was wondering just if there's anything you could share about it.
That is such a great question. It's really difficult. All of the above. I mean, everything goes through this lens of curation by junior high and therefore curation by white people and therefore what's the word? Approval by white people, which is not the best way to go about all community spaces. I don't think that everything should have to go through an ally lens, and I don't think everything should have to go through a white lens in order for it to be beneficial to the concept of community. It is really important to always be aware of what your mission is and what you're trying to do. And I feel like junior high is always processing everything that we're going through, the events that we're putting on. What do we want our quote unquote legacy to be? How do we want to help people? How do we want to shape the political awareness of community of Los Angeles, California, if we can? And I think that the best way that we can do that is by handing the mic over and by saying, you can do whatever you want. I mean, within reason, we have our community agreements, which try to establish a level playing field of respectability, of curiosity, of education. But ultimately, we try not to interfere too much with a person's vision. And we just want to encourage people and feel like really lucky when people trust us to help them share their ideas and their visions and their goals. But also, something that I feel like we've been dealing with a lot recently is what does it mean to be a politically motivated space without necessarily having the training of a crisis center or the budget to become a crisis center. And then that is also, I feel like, going to help us hone what our mission going forward is. I think that education is something that everyone should be striving towards. I think personally, I didn't go to college. I stopped after high school and was like, I'm not paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to read, Gloria Steinem and Angela Davis books that I can pick up at my local, feminist bookstore or at my local Skylight bookstore. Hold on. I'm not going to pay thousands of dollars to get a degree to read books that I can pick up at Skylight, for example, which is my local bookstore. However, we can put on free and accessibly priced workshops. We can share what we learned from the books that we do read, and we can get knowledge from the people who do wind up going to college and are like, I have a certifiable PhD, and here's how I'm going to democratize information for the people. I think it's always going to be in the system that we are in the United States and in the quote unquote Western world, wherever you think the Western world is, I think it is our responsibility to take advantage of our privileges and democratize the information when we are able to.
For sure. I love bringing forth that, really valuable idea of knowledge sharing. It's something that unfortunately there's a lot of barriers to, especially previously on this podcast. We've discussed how many barriers there are to that, specifically around music. It's like I had the opportunity to learn about this specific industry thing, about, this specific skill that's so hard to gain access to. And then people are like, oh, but because I got to learn it, like it's mine. And so really breaking that down and being like, no, I got to learn it for X reason. Therefore, I can share it with you, if I have the time, if I have the resources, which is really amazing. And, I really, but yeah, what also really caught me about what you were saying was, that point you made about the fact that it's like, these are things that we don't necessarily have formal training for, so we can't necessarily become like a crisis center. And I think that's, junior high does so much. As I mentioned, at the beginning, you have this physical space and publications and podcasts. You have all these regular events that range from, live music, but also to these workshops we've been mentioning, to these curated art shows, to, just all these drawing classes. So much is going on in the space. And I think that's always such a hard part as a community organization, or as this like venue space that is really connected to community, is you kind of get into this cycle of wanting or feeling like you have to be everything. That because you're providing one thing, then the community needs this as well. So we have to provide that as well. The community needs this. We have to provide that as well. And sometimes, that's, I feel like there's always that saying of like putting too many eggs in one basket. One of the eggs is gonna break. I think that's how the saying goes. That's not
all of the eggs breaking.
Yeah. Exactly. Like, I think there's this idea that it's like, focus on what you can do best, about what you can bring to the table in the best way, and then how you can support other people who can do other aspects of the work better, and then just working together with those other organizations. But I think that's so hard in general as organizations or as collectives, because of that feeling that it's like, we have to provide everything, and we don't always have the chance to make those connections with other people doing the work in our community. But it's so important that does exist, because that's really what's going to create that like meaningful engagement with the work, when it's not just, as you said, like one person trying to do everything and then somebody else coming along and being like, oh, don't worry, I have some time, I can do something. Even though, that is how a lot of it starts.
Yeah, I was reading this book of Angela Davis interviews, which was so incredible. And I saw Angela Davis speak recently, and she was really talking about criticism as a form of expressing love for a piece of art that you care about, or for a person, or even for yourself. She was talking about criticizing her own past works and learning from those criticisms that she was able to develop herself, and criticisms that people in her community were able to give to her that she could learn and grow from. It's really, I feel like we're kind of at this juncture in social politics in America. I know that you're in Canada, but we're really coming to this juncture of like, how do we actually deal with cancel culture? How do we actually deal with, we know you did something wrong, but we don't want to necessarily erase the problem into a prison or isolate you into, an alt-right Reddit thread. So how do we actually engage the people who we must criticize and who we must encourage to unlearn and grow in a realm that we agree with? But I also, the thing that she kept repeating over and over again is, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And every time I read something that's talking about like adaptation, refracting into something that's larger. I just keep thinking you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Absolutely. And I think with this, conversation about adapting the work that we do and understanding that we can criticize it and we can change and we can move forward, with all that in mind, what does the success of junior high look like to you or mean to you? And that could be what you feel like is successful right now, or if you think about like a successful future to it.
I mean, there's a few things that I think to me mean that junior high is successful. I love when someone says, I didn't think about it that way. That's success to me. I love when people are learning. I love when people do something different and outside of their comfort zone and find a new passion because of it. Those are all things that I find to be really successful about junior high. I think what will be successful about junior high in the long run will be an ability to engage the idea the personal is political. And when I say that, I mean telling your personal story in a truthful, occasionally joyous environment, very safe and loving and accepting environment is going to set us free politically. Ideally, we can't erase, the political realities of we live. We don't exist in a vacuum. You can't just like go to a place and be like, well, none of that exists out there. But to be making a conscious choice of like, I am choosing, again, I can't stop quoting Adrienne Marie Brown right now because I'm reading her, but to adapt towards joy, to be like, this sucks. I'm making an active choice to do something wonderful, beautiful, be with my community, experience joy, and hold on to that feeling of hope so that when I do return to this outside vacuum, or not vacuum, this outside world that doesn't allow me to always feel safe, that I can hold on to that kernel of hope from junior high, from my community, and hopefully be able to take the safe space out into the world. That would be successful to me.
I love that so much. That is genuinely like so heartwarming. And I feel like it's even, obviously more than heartwarming. Like we've seen, I mean, we really don't need studies to prove this because I think so many of us have lived it either ourselves or through other people in our community. But like life-saving is essentially what creating that feeling or space is, whenever there is a place that people can return to, that people can feel safe in, that people can go to, it makes the rest of life more livable to an extent. Because, when we're surrounded by these systems that say, you're not valued, you're not seen, you deserve to be mistreated, you don't deserve to have a good life, or you chose for yourself to have a bad life, like all of these horrible things that for so many of us and, different identities that we hold are being told. If we then go to a space where it's like, that's not true. You are loved and you are valued exactly. We're all here.
I mean, like to go further, it's like, I think we just need more and more safe spaces. And like you said, a space in your high can't be everything to everyone. And I think that acknowledging that is okay, because a safe space for everyone is very big, very hard to accomplish. I think that what would be really successful to junior high is that it opens a doorway for more safe spaces, more intentional spaces to be built, more places. I talked to, we're in Glendale, which is a primarily Armenian community. And so I try to engage Armenian community members as much as possible. And I was talking to an old roommate of mine and talking to a current staffer about how to engage American Armenians in junior high, in queerness, in art expression, when so many of the organizations are just focused on like war liberation, knowing that at the very least, my two friends are like, that is important, but there's also other stuff that we want to be talking about. I think it's important to have, the war liberation movement. I also think it's important to have the joyous artistic expression movement. And those can't always be the same organization. You have to have multiple things going on. So I never want to believe that like junior high is the center of the universe, is like the only thing that could ever exist. I hope that more people are creating joyous spaces for people to gather, for the love of artistic expression and for the love of queerness.
For sure. Absolutely. I also think like it's so important and like, obviously a reality that so much of what we've been told, or sometimes what's communicated, or what surrounds this idea that we have to be the ones doing everything or taking everything on, is sometimes even like rooted in that, idea of white saviorism, is to say like, oh, because I can do this, or because I'm in this position to do this, I have to help everyone. And it's not necessarily from that, space that shouldn't be critiqued. Like that definitely should be critiqued for that reason as well. But I mean, speaking from that critical lens, as we've been sharing, is also, as you were saying, the idea that like a safe space can't necessarily be safe for everyone, or, has to be this like intense operation to do so. Because that's so true. The idea of a safe space was created with so much vagueness that, it's like what's safe for one person isn't going to be safe for somebody else. And that doesn't make it a bad space. It just makes it a reality of living in a world where everyone has different identities, different needs, different ways that they need to show up in a space, and different ways that might make other people feel. Relationships are complex for all those reasons. And that's also why closed spaces exist, to say that not everyone has the right to exist in this space, actually, because we're watching out for this, this, and this. And, closed spaces are also really valuable, and should be respected for that. Not every space has to open up to be this like safe, inclusive space.
Exactly. I mean, the language that you use is very reminiscent of anonymous programs, AA programs. And I feel like when we started our AA program at junior high, that's what really made me think a lot about making a safe space, making an intentional space for people who find it really difficult to empathize with people who have done really wrong things. And a lot of people don't know how to talk about addiction and don't know how to talk about those sorts of societal problems, because they're like, well, of course we need to like have a space for them. Like, of course these people need to feel included and feel cherished. But then I don't want to say no one, it's really difficult to create that intentional space, especially, as a person who is not in a program, is not sober. You really have to engage with sober community and talk about what is it to create a closed sober community? What is it to create an open sober community? What is it to hold someone accountable who isn't ready to hold themselves accountable yet? I think about these very complex issues a lot, and I still haven't come to an answer yet, no matter how many people I talk to or new texts that I read. I don't know if it's necessarily my job to come up with quote unquote the answer, but I think that it is important to like interrogate and be critical of yourself and your beliefs and your biases, and wonder like, how can I do better, not only for my community, but also for myself, because you never know when, you just never know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I understand you just shared the fact that you are not personally like involved in being sober, in the sober community. So you can absolutely share if maybe you're not the best person to speak to this. But, as we are talking about the music industry, and as some of what, junior high brings forward is being a music venue, I think something that, needs to be talked about more, to a certain extent. We are seeing a lot more of it now than before, is obviously like the level of substance use, whether it be, drugs or alcohol that is involved in the music industry and has obviously been involved in the music industry for so long, has been so normalized. More and more people in the music industry are choosing to be sober for so many various reasons. But yeah, so within that system, can you speak to or share, what it meant to start kind of that AA program or build that into what junior high does?
Yeah, I mean, I personally did not start AA. Faye also did not start AA. Neither of us are sober. It would be really kind of weird if we personally started AA. What happened is quite a few members of the community expressed that it would be an incredible addition to our programming, to what we can provide to the community. And like I said earlier, I had the privilege earlier in my time at junior high to be able to donate freely labor, time, expertise. I mean, I was 18, so what expertise did I really have? But I definitely had the time and the ability to donate time. And so it was about not only finding the community desire, but also finding the person who could lead the charge. And finally, a person who I will not name because of the anonymous program, but I think she did make herself known when we announced this. But a person in the community said, I will start AA. I will be the one to make sure that we have these bi-weekly meetings, bi-weekly to be every other week, not twice a week. And I will get the ball rolling. And when I no longer have the capacity, I'll pass it on to someone else in the community who is able to take on that responsibility. I learned so much about anonymous programs while we were putting this together, being like really respectful of everyone's time, of learning the texts. It also gave me a really great opportunity to connect with my sober uncle, who has been sober for, I think, 16 years at this point. And to learn like what he is a man, so he did not necessarily have the same issues with the program that the women and queer people were talking about. But it was so interesting to be able to talk to, a man who is like, the program works great. And to talk to women and queer people to be like, the program does work, but it is not necessarily exactly in the place that I want it to be. And so it was incredible to be able to learn so much from so many different people and be able to help establish that with people who have been in the program either for 6 months all the way up until like 3 years. So yeah, that was a great learning opportunity for me personally that I feel very privileged that I got to be part of.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all that. I do think it's such an important thing to talk about, in terms of the music industry, but also the fact that, I think queer community everywhere, certainly, wherever I've been and who I've spoken to, like, has that struggle with various like addictions programs where, they go because there's not really another option, but they also don't necessarily feel safe. They don't necessarily feel like seen or heard. There's other concerns that they have. They just don't necessarily think they fit into the space for a lot of reasons. But there's just not necessarily other groups that they can go to. So I think it's so cool and so important that that community need arose, with individuals who were frequenting junior high and said, this is a place we would feel comfortable doing that. And then, the appropriate person was able to come along and, have that learning experience together to set it up. I think that's, really a huge amount of the work that gets done is that process exactly. Like, we need this. Who can do it? Who's right for it? Who can make this happen? Who can learn to support that person to make it happen? And then how do we make it sustainable?
And it doesn't have, I mean, we can talk endlessly about like capitalism and how it doesn't really afford many people to be able to take that extra time in their workday or even outside of their workday to feel like putting in that labor will be worthwhile in the end, which is like very sad. But I felt like it was worthwhile to put time in my workday. And luckily, Faye also agreed that it was a priority to time in our workday to create or to help co-create AA with our sober community members. And then outside of the workday, I would talk to my uncle, I would talk to my sober friends, and I would learn, because I personally, in my everyday life, wanted to be able to be a better ally to these people and to know, how do you frame these questions? How can I invite other people into this space that is not for me, but I did help create? And what is, it really taught me a lot about like, what is my place in this realm. And I feel like I have learned a lot of lingo, which is very fun to get to just sort of like toss around some like AA slang. But I also feel like I've learned even more and even deeper empathy with, you know, my family and with my friends. And if and when people who attend AA at junior high let me know that they are sober and how to help me help other people, I'm always really eager to learn and appreciative of the effort that people put into my growth as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm just like spouting things out.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. It makes a lot of sense. And I do know that, you know, this AA program that we've been talking about is continuing. But I would also love, you know, there's so much happening at junior high. And I mean, I just get to see that from the public facing work. But along with continuing to, you know, run and support that program, I think I would just love to hear about like all the other incredible things that junior high has got going on lately. What are like other projects that you're putting energy into? What's other work that's being prioritized, focused on right now? What events are, you know, exciting? What are you like looking forward to?
Can I ask when you plan on releasing this? Because that will definitely help shape what my answer is.
Absolutely. This episode will be coming out the second week of September.
Okay, so we would have just finished our fundraising, but this month we're starting for the first time weekly art classes with our friends Mads and Rachel, who have a company together called Hand Follows Eye. It started at junior high with the send nudes and then the no nudes. And then people, the classes, they just sell out. People love Rachel and Mads. I mean, I don't blame them. I also love Rachel and Mads, but I'm really excited to be able to offer weekly art classes that will be exploring different visual artistic expression. We will also be increasing the frequency of Ask Camp, which is led by our friend Kat. That will be happening, I think, 2 times a week this month, but we're still sort of finalizing things. We have tons of up-and-coming acoustic musicians, tons of up-and-coming rock musicians. We're always putting together poetry events. There's just so much that is constantly happening at junior high. I'm making the concentrated effort to not program quite as much now that the summer is over. I want the staff to have a break. I want the volunteers to have a break, but also I want like Faye and I to have a break. The most exciting thing that's coming up is that Faye, who is our founder, as I keep like going on and on, but she's having a baby. So there's going to be a junior high baby soon, and everyone is so stoked. We all keep talking about how annoying that baby is going to be because like he's going to grow up like wearing the coolest clothes, knowing the coolest music. It's like, how dare you just like get all of this really awesome stuff that we had to work years before we had to find it, and you're just going to have it. You're not even going to know. So, you know, I'm already mad at the baby, but who's not even born yet. But no, we're all like so excited about the blessing of new life in this really, really dark, hard time. And then I'm also really excited about everything that's coming out on our magazine, which is published on our website. There's going to be a lot more class notes, which is our sort of research infographic-y thing where a couple of us in the office will donate our time to learn about a topic and then we'll write about it and publish it. So we recently did, oh my God, now I have to think of things. What I'm currently working on, which will already be out by the time this comes out, is climate neutrality. And I think that after that, we might be doing fast fashion. We have a ton of stuff that we're just like thinking about where we're like, yeah, we say these things, but what does it actually mean? We also did like incarceration of Japanese Americans in the 40s. That was really hard to learn about, especially as like a Californian who did not learn about this in my history classes. We also will hopefully be returning to the school to prison pipeline, which we did research for an Instagram infographic, but want to definitely go more in depth into that. I also want to go into how does California get water and talking about water rights, because that's something that personally interests me. But, you know, all that I care to do at junior high in the future is continue to like learn for myself and hope that other people are also learning. And so we're going to be having more workshops, having more opportunities for people to like get out of their comfort zone and learn new stuff and find music that they can be obsessed with.
It's incredible to hear that there's not only so much to look forward to in terms of what other people get to participate in, but there's so much to look forward to as far as like what you get to do and what you get to participate in. And yeah. I feel like this goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning, where it's like, unfortunately in our world right now, those two things don't always get to meet, you know, those paths don't always get to cross. So when they do, when we get to do something we enjoy that gives other people something that they can enjoy, that's such an awesome thing to just like fall into and appreciate and be like, this is it. This is it. This is the place.
I feel super lucky, like literally every day. And I always try to get like people into the organization more, not in like a cult way, but like in a friendship way.
Yeah. And I'd actually love to talk about that for a moment, because what would you share with others looking to get into this kind of work, either like at junior high or as we were talking about before, where you can't franchise junior high. So if people want to do this in their communities, what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I was dating this person one time who was like, time is a commodity. And like every second that you don't put into something that you care about is wasted. It's like, that is such a brutalist like interpretation of like your like attention. I mean, it's true that like your attention is a commodity that should be cared for, but like it's not a waste of time to like need to rest. So what I would say is rest however you can. And then if you have the capacity, or if you want to create the time or create the capacity to be able to get involved or to create a new space or whatever it is, there are so many resources out there. We have our budget online on our website. So you can see like how not only our transparency of where money goes, but also you can see how much it costs to like run a space and what you should be budgeting for. And I think that whatever you do is not a waste of time. If it doesn't work out, you know, for decades or a year or whatever, it's always going to be beneficial to try and to grow something. And I'm sure that I'm not sure. America is sad. There's no all ages spaces anywhere, but there are ways that people can get together and can build community. There's, you know, like Nextdoor, which is primarily a source of evil and like yelling, but that you can also be like, hey, like let's get together in a park and like talk about these things. You can start like a book club. Like things that start with a small kernel that is temporary can grow into permanence. And I would just say like, if you want to get involved in junior high, all you have to do is like email us and I'll be like, yeah, come hang out. I don't know, whatever, what do you want to do? But if you want to create it for yourself, I would say rest. Don't get yourself into something that you don't have the capacity to do, because it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of thinking, so much thinking, like an immense amount of thinking that you're not even ready to think about. But do something, do it wrong, learn from your mistakes, adapt towards pleasure, and just do it. We need more of it. And even if it's not perfect, it's never going to be perfect. So I think you should still do it anyway.
I love that so much. I feel like I think partially also just because relate. I understand the fact that it's like pretty much everything I've done has been by accident and joy, and I've just been like, oh, cool, this is a thing now. Which is,
yeah, joy is important. I think that creating a space for joy as opposed to creating a space for like anger. Like, we're all angry about a bunch of things all the time. There's so much to be angry about. But when you're able to, like, I think I'm just going to talk about Adrienne Marie Brown. I wish that she would just like personally sponsor me to like dole out her little kernels of wisdom. But I think adapting towards pleasure is like acknowledging the pain of a situation and figuring out how we can no longer experience that suffering and instead engage in something joyous, engage in something that is life-changing. And it's not about ignoring the pain. You have to acknowledge it, but you also don't have to center it in order to acknowledge it. You can be like, this sucks, this is wrong. How do I adapt towards pleasure in order to make sure that this either doesn't happen again, or people who do go through this can find pleasurable alternatives and solutions?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I just keep saying I love that so much, but I just do. It's also wonderful to hear, especially like, adapting that, but also like giving that space for anger when it does exist. And also saying like anger doesn't have to just be something we take out on ourselves, though, because I think when spaces for joy don't exist, or spaces to like adapt that anger don't exist, so many of us are told that we actually like can't be angry and we can't show our anger and we can't share our anger. So creating that space where it's like, yeah, we're really angry here. Do you want to express that anger through like music? Do you want to express that through art? Do you want to like have a conversation where we talk about like how we're going to put that anger into creating resources for our community, so that therefore it's like a transformational anger? Because I think, a lot of what we're both talking about too is like anger is not like a bad emotion as it's often treated. It's like this really valuable emotion that tells us that something is wrong, that we're being mistreated, or that we're being harmed, or that we feel like we are, and that has a voice too.
Yeah, it's important to acknowledge it, but it does not necessarily have to be at the center of everything. And if it is at the center of where you are like able to work from, I have so much empathy for you, and I just hope that your community is like holding you through that process. And one day, if you want to, you can come out on the other side and be able to create something really beautiful that includes your anger through that process as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I find it funny because I know this is like a music industry work podcast, but I think in terms of like being too queer for a career, like, of course, we've predominantly talked about like emotions and healing and like abolitionists. But I think obviously that's awesome. And that is always what we are here for as well. And I've appreciated this conversation with you so much. As I said, like,
so happy. Yeah, I'm just happy to be talking. I think that it's just part of that whole like, we don't exist in a vacuum, like these are the things that are on our minds when we think about art. Like, we can't think about art without thinking about the political sector that we're in right now, where things just feel like they're constantly crumbling. But how do you find joy through this crumbling society?
Yeah.
I don't know. The Romans had to do it somehow.
And all of this is part of the work that we do, you know, as we bring that critical lens, as we ask ourselves these questions, as we say, what else can we be doing? What can we be doing better? Is where all of these things come together. So that's incredible. And I've appreciated you and this conversation and what junior high does so much. And as we come to an end, you know, as we've said, you know, and as hopefully, you know, if you're listening to it, this podcast is called Too Queer for a Career. So at the end, we always just give space. If you would like to share a story about realizing that, you know, you had to leave any sort of previous field of work that you were in because you were like, I'm too queer for this. If you have a moment like that, I know you were mentioning that you got into the work with junior high pretty young, but still, if that's like an experience that you have, I welcome you to share.
Yes, I did get into junior high really young, but started working minimum wage jobs even younger. So I think of two experiences, but one experience that really made me feel like I am too queer for this is when I was working at a music camp, and I got into this argument with two fellow counselors who were men, and one guy was like, "You're wrong," and I was like, "You're sexist." It was definitely an argument about sexism. And the other guy would not back me up, but I could see like in his eyes that he knew that I was right. And I didn't even quit. I wasn't even asked back. Like, it was like, that was the end of summer. I never worked that job again. And when I talked to that guy later, he was like, "Yeah, you were definitely right." Like, yeah, okay. Like, it's not the space for me where like people know that I'm right, which I'm always right. I'm not always right, but it's a very queering experience. It's a very queering experience to be in a position where you can't even rely on an ally to be like, "I agree with you, but I have to maintain this macho status quo at this music camp."
Yeah, absolutely. I think so many people can unfortunately relate to that, where you just kind of realize that in a working environment, there's people that you hope will support you and be there for you to make it a more manageable experience. And when you realize that certain individuals in that space like don't have your back, that can be such a huge experience where you're like, "I'm out." Like that.
I can't do that. Especially, it's like if they disagreed with me, that would be one thing. But when you agree and you can't, and you still are like not gonna help me or someone else, I think people are very afraid, like, stand up for themselves or stand up for someone else. And there really is power in numbers.
There definitely is. So, I mean, that's a good ending note to also remind people, as you were talking about at the beginning, we're going to loop this full circle. Use your privilege. If somebody is not listening to somebody that you know that they should be listening to their experiences and what they have to say, and you can come in and be like, "No, listen to this person," that has such a huge impact.
Yeah. I think part of that, like, you know, adapting towards pleasure and like not centering pain is like acknowledging the pain and being like, "You're not listening to this person." Really give this person that platform to speak their truth. And you don't have to talk over, I mean, I literally just talked over you, but you don't have to talk over someone, and you don't have to necessarily center the pain in order to like acknowledge it and be like, "Why are you not listening?" Let's really create that space.
For sure. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Eden. We really, really appreciate having you here.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. And I am so glad that I found my new favorite podcast.
Thank you for listening to this month's episode of Too Queer for a Career. We'd like to thank everyone who made this podcast possible, including Truss of Truss Products for the theme music and Hannah Shafi of FrizzKid Art for the cover design. A special thank you to Gabriel Packer of GP Productions, who edited this episode, as well as our guest Eden Hain of Junior High, who can be found at juniorhighlosangeles.com or at Junior High LA on socials. Interested in more music and interviews? Check out our sibling series, Tunes Tuesday, on the Other Team's YouTube channel to hear about music and matters from queer artists you love.